Wow, this is so exciting. We are here with some amazing panelists, and we're going to talk about women in STEM careers and really kind of focus in a little bit on math experiences in their history, in their life story. Today's event is brought to you in partnership with the Kentucky Out of School Alliance, and we actually have Molly McGowan as one of our speakers, and she'll talk about her story. But this is also an initiative of the Million Girls Moonshot, which has a lot of resources if you go and Google them to find stuff about girls in STEM. And then, of course, Million Women Mentors. We have two representatives from Million Women Mentors on the panel. And so our goal today is to provide some inspiration. So without further ado, I'd like to jump on in and introduce our panelists and then get started with some question and answer. So we have Rosemary Fama, who is an extension specialist from the University of Kentucky, and in the biosystems and agricultural engineering departments. So Rosemary, would you like to do a brief introduction of yourself, and then I'll move on to the next two?
Yeah, happy to. I'm Rosemary Fama, an extension specialist here at UK in biosystems and ag engineering. I work on Kentucky's NSF-funded established program to stimulate competitive research here. Across the state, we have a 5-year, $25 million project to enhance robotics and advanced manufacturing education and research. My specialty is in workforce development, education, outreach, and diversity. I have 2 bachelor's degrees. I have a bachelor's of arts in art history and visual studies with a minor in French studies. And I also have a bachelor's of science in math with I did pure and applied tracks, and I have a minor in statistics as well. And I'm very excited to be with you all today.
I might ask an art question towards the end, see how art and math connect. But let's go on and introduce Sheila Boynton. Sheila Boynton is the co-founder and CEO, president of Thinking Media, a professional engineer with a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering from the University of California, Berkeley, serves on many leadership positions. And I'd like to give Sheila a chance to introduce herself.
Great. Thank you, Joshua. And again, as Rosemary said, great to be with you guys this afternoon and really to help students understand the importance of math and in their career choices, much like reading. Math should sort of be the same kind of thing. Anyway, so I'm a very geeky engineer. Grew up as a child of a dad who was a chemical engineer. So I did my undergrad in chemical engineering at University of Florida. Yes, I'm a Gator. Sorry, you Kentucky Wildcats, even though you've beat us lately. So it's okay. But anyway, and then went on to do my master's, but co-founded our company 26 years ago, actually with my husband. And we have really been focused on getting more students the opportunities that really, quite frankly, the core of math provides them the opportunity to do. And so I'm sure we'll get into talking about our creations around Learning Blade and of course, Ready for Industry, but really thinking that, it's important for our students in school, out of school, to have these opportunities to learn about the applicability of what they're learning in school. So they won't tell their teacher, when am I ever going to use this? So,
Exactly.
yeah. So anyway, so thank you to Joshua, who has been an amazing person on our team for a number of years for putting this together.
Yeah, I've been waiting and itching and excited to have this conversation. So, and last but definitely not least, we have Molly McGowan who is a AmeriCorps Vista. And I particularly wanted Molly to introduce that concept to young people because I think it's so powerful. She's a recent Eastern Kentucky University graduate with a bachelor's in anthropology, with also a focus in science, in forensic science. And we were just talking about that. So Molly, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more and maybe just scratch the surface on what is an AmeriCorps Vista?
Yes. So I actually found out about AmeriCorps through my anthropology degree. My professor had done it before and she really enjoyed it. So it's kind of like Peace Corps, but on a smaller scale, if you've heard of that. And so you're assigned to a position for a year of service across America. So it could be anywhere. I chose my home state, Kentucky. And so you do a year of service, you work with a specific organization, and you really focus on volunteering your time towards a certain goal or mission. You have specific projects. And so it's a really great way to kind of, grow your way into a specific network or a specific area that you're interested in. So I thought it was the perfect opportunity for me to get into STEM, but in a different sense than what I had experienced during college. And so,
Excellent.
yeah.
Keep going. Yeah, keep going.
It's a great program. And so I'm currently with the Kentucky Out of School Alliance. We focus on after school times, and working with those providers, those programs, and expanding STEM in them. So I have a couple of specific projects that I get to work on that through. We focus on getting assets across the state, companies, schools, so that we can connect them with programs and, strengthen that programming and kind of help create more awareness about that. And especially future workforce. I know you all kind of mentioned that already. That's one of our goals too, is to get students involved with STEM careers instead of just focusing on the actual subjects, because you want to know what you're going to do with that stuff, like Josh said. So that's really important to us. But I really enjoy my work, and I do appreciate you having me here. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for those introductions. So we're going to go chronologically a little bit from your early years to today. And I really just want to start with, like, who were you in high school? What were you like? What were your hobbies? So let's start with Rosemary on that one. And maybe you sent me a little bit of notes, but I'd also like to, learn a little bit more about your experiences as a student athlete too, and how you balance that with your love of learning. So, but yeah, tell us about your high school experience, and then connect it to math. Where were you in your math storyline?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very rural area of Oregon, about an hour away from anything, including grocery stores or a traffic light. So all of my extracurriculars were based in the community, hence the athletics. I was involved with my church as well, and some volunteer opportunities with some civic organizations that started up out there. But growing up in a small town, individuals were kind of celebrated for their strengths. We had very good artists that were, teachers encouraged. And I was the kid that was deeply passionate about math. I was ready for the next problem, like, just give it to me over and over. I want some more teachers. So that was my reputation in this very small town. And that kind of set me apart in some ways. Being gifted in math, I would have to be removed from my classmates. There was from about second to fifth grade, I could only go to half of the recesses, which broke my heart, because my math class with the higher levels were during the second recess. So I kind of missed out on some of the engagement with my peers, which is where athletics came in, and really being able to build up those relationships. And when you live in a small town and you know these students from day one, you build up a chemistry both in the classroom or on the field or on the court or wherever. And so we had incredible success. I also liked participating in individual sports. My sports were cross country, track, and dance. I was a 3-time state champion, and I was also all-state in all 3 sports. And I was recruited by NCAA cross country and track and field. So that was part of my division. I was a promising student. I was valedictorian. I had high test scores. I had early admissions to all these fantastic schools on the East Coast. But at 17, when I was making these decisions, my dad suddenly passed away. And I was left with I was left with an entire change to my personal community. I had to start working. Things just kind of fell apart. So I took that grief, and I didn't apply it, I applied it towards the areas in which I knew I could already succeed, which was the athletic and the academic areas. And as I was looking for a place to then grow in a college setting, I looked, instead of those places where I had my eyes set, and looked a little bit more locally, places that I was comfortable with, small organizations, small institutions. And that was really kind of my first misstep. And what I would say was a misfit with my education journey, is that I kind of let grief drive my process in choosing my school, not so much my academic ambitions, but I let my athletic and academic come together, and I chose something I was comfortable in. Because I was just so uncomfortable with threat and all the other aspects of my life. So that I would say was like step one in how I kind of got off course on my math career.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. It's important to point out that those are some consequential decisions that require, good Good planning. I like to quote Sheila. She always says, one of the most consequential decisions is take time and choose a good mate when you're thinking about getting married. How do you say it, Sheila? You're muted.
Choosing the right partner in life.
Choosing the right
The
partner.
most important decisions you make, if not the most important decision.
But I think Rosemary's highlighting also that initial, where am I going and why am I going there, can be a powerful springboard to some of life's future adventures. Well, thank you for sharing that, Rosemary. Sheila, will you tell us about yourself as a math student in high school and some of the other stories you want to tell about early Sheila Boynton? I can't wait for this because I'm hoping I hear something I haven't heard before.
You might. So actually, similar to Rosemary, I grew up in a very rural part of North Carolina. But as you can see, I have some color. I'm not Black and I'm not white. And that was really a big defining piece of my early childhood, was not fitting in with either of those. And guys, this is long before the internet. So nobody knew where India was. And my parents were from India. And we lived in Brevard, North Carolina, a tiny town of about 6,000 people. So I really didn't fit in either sector, either with the white kids or the Black kids. And so there was a lot of that made me who I am today, very bold and strong, because I had to put up with a lot of name calling and a lot of discrimination that, you know, really we have a better understanding today, although we see a lot of things that are still showing us we got some way to go. But anyway, math was kind of my thing. I just had a natural affinity to it. I was very, very good at it. I was such a geek that when I was going into 7th grade, or maybe going into 8th grade, I went to summer school and did the whole 8th grade math book during the summer. So it started, it's just like totally geek. Let's just
Having fun in the summertime.
Having fun in the summertime. My mom would drop me to summer school so I could take math, and did the whole 8th grade book. And then after that, actually in 9th grade, there used to be, I don't even know if this is still there. There's the national math exam that all 9th graders took across the entire country. And in the state of North Carolina, I was number 9 in the whole state on that math exam. So obviously, continued to do this. I actually do remember one woman, her name was Miss Andrews. She was my 9th grade math teacher. And she called everybody by their last name. But my last name was not Boynton back then. It was an Indian one, and it's called Chupnerker. And she couldn't say my name, so I'm the only person in her whole career she called by their first name. Everybody thought that was so cool. But I loved her, and she motivated me. And of course, my dad, being a chemical engineer and really great at math, he always taught us and one of the biggest things he taught us was not to use a calculator all the time. Because now, honestly, you can ask my husband. We were at the nursery the other day buying plants, and I'm like, nope, that's not the right amount. When the guy rang up about 50 plants, I'm like, that's something's wrong. And sure enough, he charges for 6 plants too much. So I can go to the grocery store, and while I'm sitting there, doing this, and this is something that we aren't doing enough of. We're letting our kids depend too much on technology. So that's just a personal thing of mine. You should be able to do some basic math in your head, because even the kid that rang us up had to get a calculator out to do 6 times 7. He didn't know how to do it in his head.
43?
Yeah,
Just kidding.
Yes. But then, went on we actually moved to Florida when I was in 11th and 12th grade, again, still being great at math. But can I tell you one of the most upsetting stories, and this is a little bit of a dig on some sports, I will say. Every Friday, we would go for a pep rally for the football team. Every Friday. Okay. That's just what we did as a school.
Yep.
The one day of the entire school year where we were going to give out the academic awards, which I did get the best math student in our high school, we were told that we can't disrupt education by having everybody from the school come to this assembly. So only the kids that got an award will come to the assembly. Now, I'm talking, guys, this is long before probably any of you were born. This is what was going on. And I was
It kind of still is.
That we are promoting and so happy with sports. And I love sports. Don't get me wrong. I go to football games. I love sports. But the fact that that was not valued in our school, but we can miss every Friday class to go for a 30-minute pep rally. We couldn't miss one day a year to recognize academics, is something to be said for the value of this. And so, I've always been very strong, not only academically in math, but in the supporting of those that are in academics and understanding the importance and again, I could spend the entire hour talking about these experiences, but that's part of who made me what I am today and why I'm so passionate about really helping that next generation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sheila. And we're definitely going to get to how you use math in your everyday life today as adults. But I just wanted to build some of the background. So we have two rural math superstars who are now leading organizations and doing great work. So that's inspiration to all you young girls listening and young boys that like math and are just thinking, where's math going to take me? Well, look at these incredibly talented and successful women. So Molly, a little younger, just getting started, but tell us your math story in high school and, some of your electives or hobbies and things you did around that and other things. Who were you in high school?
So my high school experience is a little more current, about 8-ish years ago. And my story is similar, but a little different. I was not a math girl. I did not like math. I had nothing against it. It just wasn't my favorite. My sister and brother were actually both gifted in math and English. I was only gifted in English. So I kind of had to learn to love math, which I didn't really get to until college. I did like it, but it wasn't something that I was super interested in or thought that I could eventually have a career in or like utilize, like how most students are like, when am I going to use this? And so my experience was a little different. I was definitely an arts kid, theater, choir, marching band. I did all of that for all 4 years, or at least most of that. And so, which there's actually a lot of math involved in that too, which, you wouldn't believe, music even, especially. And so my experience was a little different. I was more involved in English. I didn't spend a whole bunch of time outside of school because all my friends, everything I was doing was tied in with school. I'd go straight from school to theater and then to marching band. And that was from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. like every day. And so, those clubs and things that I was involved in were really special to me. And so I wasn't as academically geared. I did well in school. I loved my academics. I loved my teachers, but it wasn't the core focus because academics are important, but there's things outside of that that still reinforce them that aren't necessarily your classes or a specific club geared towards a specific subject, if that makes sense. And so I think something that's a little important about my story is that, it's not directly linked to academics, and that's okay because I still ended up where I am and got that inspiration, even though it wasn't directly from being not necessarily the best at something, but being especially gifted in something. I actually went on to do forensic science in college, which I know we'll get to, but is important for this story. I took a forensic science class, and I think they call them, not quite an extracurricular, but I don't want to say encore. I think we called it encore, but it was those classes that aren't your core academic classes. And I fell in love with it. I realized that I really liked it. It was something I really wanted to do and used math in a way that I was comfortable with and that, I could directly see the effects of or the results of. And so that was something that really got me on track for what I wanted to do. And not for the same reasons, but similar to Rosemary, I kind of chose a school that was at my comfort level. My older sister went out of state. It was expensive. My parents were like, can you please try to go in state? And so I ended up at Eastern Kentucky University. It was the only school I toured. My mom thought I was nuts. But I'm one of those people that, if I see something I really like it, then I stick to it. And that was important during my college career as well. But yeah, it was super comfortable for me. They had a great forensic science program and it allowed me to do what I really wanted to do at that time. So yes, my experience was a little different.
Yeah, and I appreciate you giving a well-rounded edge to you don't have to be a math genius or live and breathe thinking math all day, but we're going to get to the point where hopefully everyone watching will see that math is part of what we do in our daily lives and it's important. I'd also like to point out, I think it was astronaut Mark Kelly, but there was a NASA astronaut who said I was a C minus, B plus, or C plus, B minus math student, but look at me now, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't think your performance in math in high school should determine your thinking of how you will use math in your life. As you said, you fell in love with math in college. So let's go to college. We're going to start actually with Molly on this one, and Sheila will start with you on the last question. But my question here is, how did you sort of went there, but describe the pathway to choosing your majors, and did your opinions in math change in college? Molly, we'll begin with you. You just kind of keep going where you were going with forensics.
Okay. So yes, that one course in high school really kind of piqued my interest, if you will. And, even though it was that one class, it really aligned with what I was good at and what I knew I was capable of, but also something that I could grow in and that I wouldn't necessarily get bored of, which was important to me. And so I love telling this story, but I went to college at EKU, of course, and I changed my major on my first day of college. I went in as a criminal justice major because, I wanted to be a detective. I thought that's what I wanted. And then, when I got there, I realized that I didn't have enough lab experience to know that that wasn't something I was interested in. I thought it was hard. I thought it was all math. I thought that I couldn't do it. And it was really intimidating to me, but I got there and saw all the opportunities that I was going to have to get better at it and to kind of fall in love with it a little bit more. So I changed my degree to forensic science my first day of college. And, when you get to college, you see all the classes that you need to take, like they map it all out for you. They show you how difficult it's going to be, so you know what to expect. And there were some hard math courses in there for me. I had to do physics, 1 and 2. I had to do calculus. I had to do statistics. I had to have this well-rounded mathematical experience. And that was scary for me. And so, they have resources like tutoring, but at the end of the day, your tutor can only push you so far. You have to want to do the work. And the big turning point for me with mathematics was that I realized it's very similar to science, and that rather than just numbers and equations, it's a way of thinking. It's a way of seeing the world. And that shifted everything for me, because that is something I'm super interested in. I love to learn. I love getting to see things differently than just normal people or in a different way, because then you can share that with other people and it just like changes their whole worlds. And that was something that I wasn't expecting. And so I actually went on to tutor other students.
Nice.
My last year of college, my end of my junior year, all of senior year, I actually started working at our success center. And, I fell in love with my job. I loved working with students because I got to share my passions with them, break all these complicated things down for them and really just help them, express their needs, but also push them towards their interest or their passions. And that was something that I really loved about my college experience. But just getting into that thinking, physics was crazy for me. I couldn't wrap my head around it, but it's because, it's different in the way that you process and see things. Same with calculus. I actually really liked calculus. I got a B on my final. I was very proud of it. And, taking pre-calculus and then seeing that shift, I just thought it was really cool, because you're taking everything you did and then doing it again, but in a better way. And really getting to see that firsthand was important, and also understanding those, thought processes and pathways was really special to me, like seeing those patterns, because once you see them, they're everywhere, in life, in college, in science and math, even in arts. There's so many different things, and I started to realize math was everywhere. It scared me, but I realized how useful and cool and interesting it was, because I got to be exposed to all those different facets or experiences that with math. So, and I'm sorry, you asked about extracurriculars, right? As well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you talked about the teaching you did, or the helping of other teachers, but were there other things you did?
Yes, I forgot about this because I got so excited about all that other stuff. I also did end up doing some criminal justice work. I actually got to help run a crime scene. We held a conference where I also got to run through a crime scene with my team members and do like a whole obstacle course. It was crazy. And, we had a crime and chemistry club that I also helped run. I also did the forensic science peer mentoring group, working with freshmen, helping them with classes and their interest in making sure that they know what to expect in their college experience, that it's not just numbers, it's not just hard, there's so much more to it. You know, campus connections, professor connections, you know, fellow student connections. So making sure they were aware of all that. And then I also did theater, like I mentioned in high school. I pulled in some arts and got to do so much with them, like, you know, manage money, write math, and do productions and manage productions and really involve myself in that passion of mine while still being able to move forward with my academics. And so again, pattern for me. Yeah,
you sound
get
like
to
someone that
have-
took great advantage of all the courses that they are, all the extracurricular activities that were offered in college. And I'm really
Yeah.
glad you mentioned the importance of peer networks, because I think as we transition over to Rosemary, she'll talk a little bit about that as she tells us about her college trajectory and how you chose your major and the choices you made and the things you've done in college. But touch on that peer network, if you would, Rosemary.
Yeah, okay. As I mentioned earlier, I kind of had a little bit of a misfire, or I needed to correct my educational pathway in mathematics. The school I chose was based off of the athletic and academic opportunities, and that kept me, especially being a two-sport athlete, it kept me incredibly busy and distracted. And that was okay working through my grief because I didn't have to focus on that, but it did take away my attention. And the people that can really help you in those times when you are working not only through your professional development, but the psychosocial parts of your life as you're growing and developing into a young professional are mentors. And this was another red flag. My first red flag was choosing my university through grief. The second one was not being able to identify positive mentors. I kept running into toxic mentors. The departments I was in, as well as the my coach on the cross country and track team, we didn't have a single female member of our entire coaching field. It was a very toxic environment. In fact, about 5 years after I left, the whole coaching staff lost their license to coach and are no longer able to coach in the state of Oregon. And the same is true in the math department. I went there under the promise that they were starting a physics department. I wanted to study physics. I recently read my super embarrassing, charming entry exam, and it talked about how much I love physics, and this was going to be my path. It combined the pure and the applied parts of mathematics in a way that I found a way forward. And they said, don't worry, you know, your first year, we're not going to have it. By the second year, we're going to have a full physics program, but we even have this new faculty member. So just get those first classes out of the way. So I did my calculus, chemistries, everything I could, those extra classes, the music, the art history, which tickled a bug in me, inspired some pattern recognition skills. But by the end of my second year, you know, I had quit the track team. I knew that I wasn't going to move forward, and they hadn't established a physics department. To this day, they still do not have a physics department. So
false promises.
You know, third red flag. So during that time, you know, when I was waiting on people and not fitting in and feeling uncomfortable and finding myself looking for answers from toxic mentors, I was hoovering up classes in both pure and applied mathematics. And so when I finally turned to my peer networks, which I had been building, because everywhere I went, I just felt either uncomfortable, unwelcome. You know, I heard comments, sexist comments about women not being able to do research at a high level in mathematics, and they're really only good for being educators. I heard comments about my ethnicity, being an Italian, a Sicilian American, and what that meant for people in that community. I heard all sorts of things in a new place, and I ended up just turning to my peers. One of my favorite quotes is STEM spaces are social spaces, which is so true because STEM and all these fields are collaborative in nature. So even if it feels like you're doing it by yourself with a piece of paper and pen working through a proof, you are working on the work from people that came before you, and you're putting something out there that somebody else could then respond to or build on in the future. So no matter where you are in STEM, you're in social spaces, and you start to build up those connections. These connections I still have to this day.
Nice.
These people are all over the STEM field. We had parties in our math department where we played just Pictionaries and took our mind off of stuff. We got together. We all had whiteboards that we put challenge problems on. It was just building a community and building up trust with each other because we weren't finding it with our role models.
Yeah.
So as we built up experience, we were building trust with one another. So that's another.
And so
thing I
what
wanna-
does "you can't microwave trust" mean to you?
Yeah, so that is actually the first times I had a positive role model was a computer science professor. I still have this quote behind me, Dr. Audrey Morrell. So you can't microwave trust. You can't just pop it in there and be automatically gained. You have to earn it through shared experiences. And I wasn't able to do that with the more senior adults in that community, but I was able to do it with my peers. So these peer networks, as you're moving forward, are so important because they're going to be with you.
Mm.
If you look back as you look forward, they're going to be with you your entire career as they've been with me. I can still reach out to the kid I met in high school at a math lead exam who ended up going to the same school and is now a professor at Seattle Pacific University. And so being able to go from teenager to adults with children is, pretty spectacular, and being able to help each other on the way is something
That is great. And the research actually points to women that end up starting in STEM majors and graduating with their STEM major. They had a near peer or peer network that supports them on their journey. So anyone listening to Rosemary's story, you built it yourself, but many colleges and universities and community colleges now have those structures in place because it is research proven to be one of the best strategies to encourage diversity into that STEM pipeline. Sheila, in your college trajectory, some stories, about choosing your pathway as a chemical and civil engineer, and also, keep telling us your math journey, if you would.
Yeah, just to piggyback onto the mentor thing, honestly, me coming up in the early 80s, there were not a lot of mentors to be had, to be honest. There were very few girls in my program. I know Josh was like challenging me. I'm like, we shouldn't be talking about there's only girls, but I was one of two that graduated with chemical engineering at the time that I did. And so really in terms of peer groups or whatever, it was really, quite frankly, my guy friends. They accepted me how I was. And in fact, it was very funny because there were a bunch of men in chemical engineering, and a lot of them were married already because they were a little older. They'd come back to do chemical engineering. I was just pure undergraduate. But their wives felt fine with them being with me because they knew they would not be with other women or whatever. I don't know what that says about me, but I did marry one of my classmates and have been married for 40 years.
Was it a bus ride?
It was a bus ride. It was several things, but I think the point is that mentors, sometimes you really have to seek them out, and you've got to find where they are, or then you have to make your peer group kind of the one that covers you and works with you. And so we studied together as a group, and it was a very, very, very fun group that we worked together. And so I think that was really fun for me. I actually happened to fall between the University of Florida changing from quarters to semesters. So that actually distilled down to a group of about 15 students in chemical engineering that didn't meet the semester criteria and were too far behind to go quarter. So we were like sort of these little stepchildren that we had to take the classes as they offered them. And we did graduate in 4 years, which doesn't happen that much nowadays in a lot of engineering programs, but we did put a lot of pedal to the metal to make sure that we could. Interestingly enough, I'll talk a little bit about my own daughter's experience. My oldest daughter was a President Scholar in engineering at Georgia Tech. And so Georgia Tech actually recognized the value of these mentors, specifically for girls. And so they actually made seniors mentor freshmen as they came in, because what they found is those students that were coming in as freshman students in engineering a lot of them were dropping out. Part of it also had to do with the Hope Scholarship, because in Georgia, they had a Hope Scholarship. Now we were out of state, but there was a Hope Scholarship that actually would fund you as long as you maintain a certain GPA. Well, guess what? The GPA was the same, whether you were in basket weaving or you were in, neurophysics, like it was exactly the same, which seemed to be disingenuous to the program. And so many of the students, not just girls, boys and girls, would drop out of the engineering because they wanted to keep their Hope Scholarship and they need their grades to go up. So I think, there's a lot of things that we can look at systematically around how do we change that. I actually served as the first parent advisory board chair for Georgia Tech. And so we helped sort of highlight some of these issues to help them see how they could work with legislators and others to make some recognition around, if you're in engineering, maybe you have a little bit of a different criteria that you're looking for in order to keep your scholarship. For me personally, I have a very dull life. It sounds exciting, but it hasn't been. It's basically go to college, study chemical engineer, graduate with it, get a job, get married, have kids, start a company, sell a couple companies. It's like, it's kind of almost a textbook thing. And it wasn't, I don't remember struggling that much. Obviously there were moments in class, where you're like, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing here. And, that kind of thing. And you have to just really pull up your boots and get, just study as hard as you can and try to learn it. But I think the one thing I always like to tell people, it's really not about what you do in school, guys. It's about what you do after you leave school. So you use school as an opportunity to become a learner, to learn from people around you. You need some basic foundational skills, no question about it. Math is one of them, reading's the other one, writing. A lot of tech people think they don't need to write. You need to write, no matter who you are, you got to write. Things of that nature. And then learning to speak. I actually was not the best speaker. And now I'm asked to speak all over the country. But when I was in 10th grade, actually, I had just moved to Florida, as I mentioned, and we had to do an oral book report. And so I got up to do in an English class. So I got up to do my oral book report. And the teacher, she embarrassed me so badly. She said to me, "You sound like you're dead. That's the worst thing I've ever." She just like gave it to me. Now, to be honest, I told you already, I'd been through a lot of people talking negative to me. Other people could have taken that and just cower and never get up there ever again. Nope. I took it as a challenge. I went home. I can still remember standing in front of my bathroom mirror, doing my book report for the next time, at least 10, 15, 20, 30 times. Just kept practicing. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good. And I went back the next time it was time for book reports, and I did my book report and I got an A+.
5 stars.
I was just not going to let someone beat me down, particularly my English teacher in high school. So, at that point, it gave me confidence to go out and talk more. And quite frankly, we went to graduate school at UC Berkeley, and, whatever your politics are, that's just where we were. And, but we got involved in a peace movement. And that was another place where we learned again to speak, confidently, to be confident in what you're speaking about. So, I think we're talking about math, but, there's so many other factors that go into make you who you are. And so, and the one thing I've always tried to do, particularly with those, I have mentored many, many, many people, girls, boys, adults, etc. But really, what I do is try to find what people are good at and focus on that. With people, I also try to find if we're politically different or socially different, I find what do we connect on? Again, there's always something you connect with anybody. And so I think, those are the skills that we've got to continue to promote. Math is important. Don't get me wrong. We're talking about math, but you got to factor in some of those other skills too.
People skills. Look for the commonalities.
Commonality. And I do want to give a shout out to Jennifer Gregory on here, who's our kind of computer science person. And she said, calculus is wonderful. I liked calculus, but honestly, I loved linear algebra. Those matrices and all just made total clear sense to me. And, to that day, I always have to hold that over my husband's head because he generally did make better grades than me, but that's the class he had to drop and I got an A.
Linear algebra. I would like to, if I can point out that Sheila and I did a presentation recently and she made me practice 8 times and I appreciated it because we did a great job. So sometimes you do want to practice for those big moments. Let's transition into what we're working on today, what you love about your job, and if you will, make the connection how you're maybe using your math today. Some of us might be using advanced math. Others might just be using regular math, but that math skill, whether it helps in our analytical brain or actually in the work we do. So I'm going to push it back to Sheila so you can start this one. And then lastly, what advice, and I think you just gave some great advice, but what advice do you have as well? So what do you do at your job? What do you love about your job? And where does math fit in your current role?
Well, I mean, now I'm a CEO of a small educational tech company. We've sold a couple of products, have been sold largest by ACT. Math for me now is analytical in terms of looking at pricing. I develop pricing for our company on what we charge for our systems, et cetera. I do that negotiating. I handle the revenue, sort of the books, et cetera, not the detail books. We have accountants and other people for all that, but what comes in the door. And then, really, I think math and STEM in general, it gives you analytical skills. And so, so much of what we're trying to do in the world, no matter what field you're in, is analytical. Are you trying to determine if these people are going to say yes, even if you're in sales or whatever you're doing? Are you analytical enough to know who is strategically should you go after and who should you just leave alone? We're not going to make everybody happy in the world. Let's be clear on that. So really using your analytical skills, which are really based in math around what you do. I have a very cool dad. He's 90 years old. And obviously I told you, he is a math genius as well. Well, I'm putting myself in his bucket, but maybe he's better than me. I don't know. But anyway, he wrote a really cool book and it's called Living Life Free with Statistics and Numbers. Now, most people say statistics and numbers freak them out. But if you think about it, this is what the example he uses. If you are going to go to the grocery store to get a gallon of milk, you can calculate about maybe 50 to 75 decisions you make doing that task. You got to decide what car you're going to take, what keys you're going to pick up, what you're going to do, how much is it going to cost, what your money is. Like you just start doing all of that. And he also believes, and I think it can be shown that all your decisions you make are made because of the analytic part that you have put into it. So, I think we think about math as only being numbers. It's really about thought process. And so, and I see someone loves statistics. My older daughter that I told you, oh, that was you, Molly. Yes. So statistics was my oldest daughter's favorite subject in school, even though she liked it, AP, all the BC calculus, everything in its grandmother, and did industrial engineering. Statistics was still the thing that took her to where she is today, which is at DoorDash heading up strategy for them. So, I think there's really opportunities for students to be able to understand the analytical nature of it. And so I think that's what I would drive home is it's not always just 2 + 2. It's also about how do you analyze and make decisions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sheila. And I've met your dad and he's an incredible human being. And I'm glad that we got to share his book and his story as well. So let's go to Molly. What are you currently working on? And as your Vista year ends, where do you see yourself going? You said something about hard science in the lab. Tell us about where you're headed and how math plays a role in some of that lab work, if you would.
So, like I mentioned earlier, I'm currently a STEM Vista. I work with the Kentucky Out of School Alliance under a nonprofit called Save the Children. And I would say my favorite thing about what I get to do is making STEM more accessible, whether that's to, underrepresented populations, specifically women and young girls, and also just, more rural areas across the state, and just really getting it in students' hands and brains, but in a way that's not overwhelming and is fun and involved. And, me personally, I did mention hard sciences because I'm a hands-on student, I'm a hands-on person. And that's something that I think is kind of unique to science in a way. In a laboratory, you have to do things yourself. Like they're not going to do it for you. They'll show you, but you have to carry out the experiments and whatever's asked of you. And, that's why I loved lab in school. I always did lab the best instead of, the specific curriculum. Anytime I was in lab, I had students that wanted to work with me because I was kind of the best sometimes. And so I really enjoyed it, but I do use math. It's not quite, directly hands-on, analytical, hard math. It's more so kind of what I was talking about earlier, and what Sheila mentioned about the thinking process, being analytical about things, not directly going through math, but in that way of thinking, those patterns. It's very strategic. It's how we kind of organize our work, like the asset mapping that I did. I am picking places across Kentucky, but working on how we can utilize them. We're heading this group called a Future Workforce Coalition right now, trying to organize that, getting members. We want to do an event. It requires planning financially, but also strategically with organizations, time, location, all of that stuff. And so that kind of plays into that analytical nature. We also get to do mini grant competitions to help specific programs expand their STEM programming. And so again, more on the finances side, I would say that I'm more directly involved in. And so getting that money to them, helping them budget it, figuring out what they're going to do with it in a feasible amount of time. And so all of that is kind of, what I really do. And I end my year of service in July, I think July 5th. And after that, I do really want to get back to hands-on science now that I've kind of had the experience that's not directly linked with it. It's a more broad educational experience. And so my goal is to go into the field, get that hands-on experience, and really get to do what I love directly. I love my job right now, but I am a lab rat, so to speak. I love being in the lab. I love getting to run tests. The processes are very satisfying to me because it's all laid out for you. You just, you do it and you get your results and interpret them. And that's something that, I truly value as an experience and know I would not get bored of. So that's kind of where I am.
That is great. And thank you for doing a year of service. I know AmeriCorps and Vistas are really dedicating themselves to the communities, going back into different communities in the United States and supporting that. So pretty cool that you were here today to share that story. So Rosemary, if you will round us out, make a pitch for UK, the work you do, and why, and what the work you're working on, why you love it, and where math plays a role.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate because I get to work at UK, but I also get to work with 7 other institutions across across Kentucky, serving students statewide and making measurable improvements to workforce and research infrastructure here. So 25% of my job, what I say, is pretty math focused, doing assessments, technical writing, being able to know how to write a survey, being able to meet those standards of the NSF, because this is a federally funded grant that I work on. We have certain levels that we need to meet. And then the other 75% are those transferable skills from math that we were talking about, the analytic skills, the writing skills, which are incredibly important, problem solving, science communications, mentor training, how to talk to people. That's the rest of my job, is then trying to find the connections, hear the problems, hear where the needs are, and trying to find the connections and those solutions, facilitating partnerships and collaborations, which has been the most rewarding part of my job. We have collaborations that have started from just a simple online conversation that are now multi-million-dollar projects in this state. So being able to connect people, bring them together in this under the umbrella of being able to improve the research infrastructure here in Kentucky is pretty exciting. And I love that I get to combine all these different skills, things that I learned in math. I get to touch on that every year, this time of year specifically, a little overrun, but it's exciting. Additionally, the writing skills that Sheila mentioned, one of the best gifts I received was from my a mentor once I transferred to UK to finish my math degree. And it was a copy of The Elements of Style by Strunk and White. I know White is E.B. White, the author of Charlotte's Web. And it is a book for any writer in any style, but this was given to me by one of the most celebrated mathematicians at the University of Kentucky. And he said, if you want to improve your skills and get to the level, start with this book. So I thought that was a great piece of advice. Also, show up for office hours. As I mentioned earlier, math is inherently collaborative, and professors will be your best first collaborator. And you should always ask them, if they know how to solve a problem another way. So I went to them with all sorts of things. And yeah, most of the
Okay.
times it was maybe I'm stuck on this problem and we get to the end together. A lot of times it was them leading me to get to it myself. But before I left, I always asked, do you know how to solve this another way? Because yeah, 99 out of 100 times they did, and it would blow your mind. You know, you'd be taking a class in topology, and then they would pull out something from geometry to show you about how to get the same answer. So math is always exciting. The most beautiful things are one that's simple and surprising, and those can happen in really formal spaces or informal spaces. So go to those events, the math parties, the lectures, create space for yourself and your social self.
Wow, this has been such a powerful panel. I have 3 daughters, and I will go home and share some of the epiphanies that I got from today. Y'all just took advantage of the opportunities you had to experience different, connections, build peer networks, participate in different groups. But one thing I heard, and I just it'll sit with me for a long time, with math, not for math's sake, math for well-rounded thinking sake, to help you in all your other endeavors. I think all 3 of you beautifully touched on that. I'd like to thank everyone for their time today, for sharing their thoughts and really just sharing your story. I think they're unique, they're different, but they're all lead to the successes you're having today. So and I'm not sure if you guys have any other questions or comments for each other, but I'm wrapping up and saying thank you to everyone. I will add just a little bit about the organization I'm with as I wrap up. Learning Blade, it works with KIOSA, the Kentucky Out of School Alliance, to provide those STEM career explorations so kids can see the real world STEM careers. I like to say you want to see it so you can be it. So we have all 12 missions in Learning Blade for students to really connect in different career clusters. And one of the things we do, I'm just going to get into the missions, is we've got a lot of math problems, that show how math works in different industries and different careers, whether you're, working computer science and using big numbers and like terabytes and gigabytes and exabytes, which are exponential notation, or whether you're in biomedical engineer, thinking about the size of heart valves and how they apply in the volume of someone's heart, or whether you're really looking at energy, right? All of the different lessons in Learning Blade have some math, but also some of those English skills and other real world skills. And this is available to all the schools in Kentucky, thanks to our partnership with the Kentucky Out of School Alliance. And you can get your account by going to learningblade.com/KIOSA, or as I say it, KIOSA, KYOSA. So yeah, thanks everyone for your time today. This was great. We'll send the recording out around Kentucky, and hopefully more people will hear your story and learn from your experiences. So thank you very much. Stop the recording.